reading today is something that certainly we as Greeks and as those from the Mediterranean can much appreciate, because one of the great memories that all of us have is sitting down and having a meal with our family. So anytime a Greek hears the word feast, that immediately gets their attention, especially if they're being invited over to somebody's house and they don't have to do the work, right? So that's what we have today, and it's a different kind of feast. So the way that the gospel reading begins today, it catches us in the middle of the story. So we really have to back up a little bit and see what is the beginning of the story. Because it starts off with Jesus said a parable. Well, Jesus said a lot of parables. So let's give the story some, what we call context, all right? So if we read a little bit further back, it says, one Saturday, Jesus went to dine at the house of a ruler who belonged to the Pharisees, and they were watching him. So now we know where Jesus was. He was invited to a feast. He was invited to a dinner. And he was invited to a dinner with the leaders of the community, the Pharisees, okay? And he looked around and he saw that each one of them was looking for their place at the table. Now, this is very common for me growing up. And it was a little bit strange to Presbytera, but when she first started coming over to the house, after we were dating, she noticed that there was a chair that you do not sit in, because that's where the old man sat. And nobody sat in that chair, all right? And so she didn't necessarily grow up with that. I don't know if that's a custom that, Eric, you had that in your house? There was okay, your father had a place, okay. And so I understand this, as most of you probably do, is there's an assigned seating. If I go and do a house blessing at somebody's house, and then we go and we stay, we have dinner or lunch or everything like that, they're like, oh, Pater, Pepe está cathicedo. So they're very place-oriented. And Jesus sees this, and he wants to make a comment about it. And he says, don't worry about your place so much. So when one of those who was at the table with him heard Jesus say these things, he said, but blessed is he who will eat the bread in the kingdom of heaven. So now he's trying to look good in front of Jesus. Now, when you use the word bread, arto, you're talking about food. Breaking bread, it's a dinner. You're having food. So this is what he's talking about, those who eat bread. Of course, there's also it also connects to the 5 loaves and all of this. But here, he's talking about this feast. So this man stands up and says, he says, blessed is that person who's going to eat bread in the kingdom of heaven. Now we get to the reading of today. Because Jesus says, all right, let me tell you a parable. Now we've got context. Now we know. So he says, let me tell you this parable. And he begins that parable by saying, a man once gave a great banquet and invited many people, and he sent his servants now to get those people who were invited. Now remember, the Pharisees are the ones this is the leaders of the community. These are the people who are studied in the church. Well, synagogue, but these are the people who are studied. They're the ones who know the theology. So they're going to remember back. And they're going to say, this sounds like something I've read in the Old Testament. And this sounds like something Isaiah said. I'm trying to remember where that is. Here it is. Chapter 25. And the Lord God will make for the people of Israel a feast of wine and food, and well refined, and he will swallow up death forever, and the Lord God will wipe away the tears of all faces and the reproach of his people, for the Lord has spoken. For on that day, the Lord our God, who we have waited for, has come. So now the Pharisees are thinking, I see what he's talking about. He's talking about now that we, as Israel, are all going to be saved. But Jesus says, wait a minute, there's more. And so then he goes in and tells about those people who are invited and decide not to come. Hey, I got some land, I got to take care of it, I can't come. I bought some cattle, I bought some ox, can't come. I got a wife, I can't come. Now, if you think about that, those are the stupid excuses, those are the most stupid excuses that you could think of. Which one of you, any of you, would buy land and then later after you bought it, say, I got to go check it out and see? Anybody that's a real estate agent out there would say, this is the stupidest excuse I've ever heard. No, you go, you take a look at the land, you say, I kind of like that land, you make a deal, you make a bid, and then you buy it. So, excuse number one doesn't work. The second one now, he's buying the cattle, he needs to examine them. Same kind of thing. This is why you have stockyards. You go to a stockyard and then you examine it. You know, the standing joke about you lift up the lip just to see how the teeth are. You examine the cattle, you take them out, you see if they're strong, and then you say, all right, I'm going to make a bid on that. So the second one is absolutely stupid. The third one about the wife, he just gets married. He's got to go home to his wife. It's a small village. Listen, in Greece, the same thing. If there was a wedding going on a weekend, none of you would plan a great feast because you'd say, we got a party here that's going to last 3 days. So why am I going to now have a banquet? So the third excuse makes absolutely no sense. So these are people that don't want to come. They've received the invitation and they don't want to come. This is what Jesus now is pointing at. Is he's saying, hey, Pharisees, I've been talking to you for several years now, and you refuse to listen. You are the people who are not invited. So you know who I am going to invite? I'm going to invite now those people that are outside of your community. And who are those people that are outside of the community of Israel? Us. Is anybody out here Jewish? Are you Jewish? No, you're a Gentile. You are not. In fact, as Greeks, we were pagans. So these are the people outside of this nation of Israel who God is going to redeem that they read about in Isaiah. And this is the people he's saying, if you're not going to come to my feast, then here's the people that I'm going to invite. And as we hear in Holy Week, when we hear about the 10 virgins and the lamps, those people are going to be left out in the cold. So Jesus calls out to them and says, pay attention, because once the door is closed, you can't get in. So when we read these, we have to read it with a discerning mind. We have to get the context of the story. We have to see now whose audience Jesus is speaking to, and then we have to look beyond the veil of just a cursory viewing of 3 people that had an excuse and realize the true ridiculousness and the folly of what they were saying, and then finally see how that calling then applies to us. Are we the ones who will make these silly and stupid excuses and then at the end wonder why we are locked out of the kingdom of heaven?